slowing down. Yeah, the space, it seems the same. Made all the rooms cold and grey. Filled with words you'd never say.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so sorry to interrupt what will be some, I'm sure, very valuable post-lunch conversations. And it's always a challenge to run a session, I reckon, on the first day after lunch, as people have just got to see their friends and colleagues again in the sort of longest break, and then we're bringing you back quickly into a concurrent session. So we will try and make the content of this as energizing and exciting as possible to keep your attention for the next hour and a half. So welcome to Concurrent 4. Don't be confused by the image on the slide. That is not the setting for this discussion, downtown Brisbane. We're actually talking about young people leaving care and housing options for young people leaving care in remote communities. So my name is Dan Jefferson. I'm the lead partner at KPMG in Australia for social services. By way of background, I've not always been on the dark side in consulting. I spent 23 years in the public sector. As you can tell by my accent, not all of that time in Australia either. So some time in the UK and the rest of that time in Australia focusing on quite complex social policy issues. And as I was saying to Andy a moment ago, probably the high point of my career was when the Victorian government gave me, in their wisdom, joint responsibility for child protection strategy and social housing strategy in the same job. And those two passion areas come together very well in this session as we think about some of our more vulnerable young people and their transition into adulthood and the very strong role that housing can play or not play on the other side of the coin in that journey. Before we start the session, I just want to acknowledge the Jagera people and the Turrbal people as the traditional custodians of Meanjin and the land on which the Brisbane Convention and Exhibition Centre now stands. And I offer my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's connections to land, sea and community, and my respect for their cultural, spiritual and educational practices. And because this session is being run virtually as well, and there are people joining from all around Australia, I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which our virtual attendees are participating from as well. So this session is being streamed. It's also being recorded and will be available for delegates to view after the conference. And I should say up front, we will be taking questions as well. So the format today is we're going to hear from each of our presenters. I'm going to ask a few questions after that about some of the themes that have been covered off in the presentations, and then we will throw to you for your thoughts, observations and questions, as well as people online. So we'll try and mix it up in terms of the questions that are coming through. For the people joining us online, you probably know the drill already, but please use the Q&A tab to the right of your screen, and you will also find a copy of any presentations on that page as well. For those of you in the room, if you do have questions, I'd just encourage you to let the panel know where you're coming from, literally, metaphorically, to help them kind of understand the sort of base of your question, and keep questions as succinct as possible so that we can offer that opportunity to as many people as possible. And raise your hand if you're in the room if you want to ask a question so that the volunteers can bring the microphone to you. Before I introduce today's amazing presenters, I'd also like to acknowledge people in the room or online who have lived experience of housing vulnerability, who are at the conference either as presenters or delegates. Your voices are really important to this discussion, and I encourage you to participate in as much as you're comfortable to do so. So now to the content of today's session, and as I said earlier, this really is a session that brings together a few of what I'd call the big tectonic plates of social services and social policy. Every night across Australia, hundreds of young people are staying in some form of residential or home-based care away from their immediate family. And in recent years, a national campaign led by Anglicare and other organisations has really brought focus to the care needs of those young people as they leave formal care and move in, as I say, to independent adult life. That campaign, Homestretch, has successfully encouraged state and territory governments to act and extend support out to 21. But despite this success, and we'll touch on this in the presentation, gaps remain throughout the country, and nowhere more so than in the area of housing options for those young people. And at the recent Homestretch Symposium held in Melbourne, research commissioned by Anglicare really pointed to those gaps, which we'll try and highlight a little bit more in presentation and I hope in discussion. And if you think the challenge looks stark in metro areas, just think about what that looks like the further you go away from our urban centres and into rural and remote Australia, where the availability of housing and services can become even more fragmented, and the economies of scale there to develop housing options become less easy to manage and deliver. So I'm delighted with that very brief context to introduce our three presenters who will shed light on this important topic for us today. In no particular order, our presenters are firstly Emily Dewar from Broome Youth and Families Hub. Emily is a qualified counsellor with a commitment to raising awareness around mental health, holistic wellbeing and human rights advocacy. With 15 years experience working with youth and more than a decade of working in remote Aboriginal communities, Emily's passion for promoting empowerment, inclusivity and progressive leadership stands behind the backbone of all that she does. Next, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Marcia Gerard from MG Corporation. Marcia is a Mirrawong Gadjurong woman from Kununurra, East Kimberley region, and Marcia has worked in the community services sector for over 25 years. Marcia strongly believes that connection to family, country, community and culture is fundamental to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's safety and well-being. And last but not least, Andrew Kazim from Anglicare WA, who is also working currently for the Department of Communities in WA. From 2018, Andy led the co-design and development of Homestretch in WA, working in collaboration with young people, Aboriginal communities, academics, practice experts, and the child protection system to develop the service model and policy framework for WA. And you can find detailed bios on the conference portal for all of our speakers. So I'm going to invite Andy to present first, and I'd just encourage you to make our presenters feel really welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to also thank Dan for your very welcome, generous words. I'm here standing on Yagara Turnbull country, feeling really privileged to have an opportunity to share some of what I've learned. I want to pay my respects to the strength and the cultural resilience and the elders, past, present, and the Aboriginal people who are on this journey with us in Western Australia, who are driving a better future for young Aboriginal people coming out of the care system. That's the right button. I guess most people in this room probably have heard of Homestretch. I'm not Paul McDonald. Paul McDonald is often at these forums talking about Homestretch, but the commitment to extending support to young people was driven by a national campaign, but one that recognised that every state and every place in every state needed to find solutions that worked for their young people. And so we're at a really positive place in our journey in terms of the broader reform. There's a national commitment across the country. There's over $350 million committed by state governments towards implementing this extension of supports by right to young people. And at the recent symposium, I guess there was a really a celebration of how far we've come, but a recognition we're at the end of this beginning and now the real work is ahead. And that is about how do we implement this in a way that works. For us in Western Australia, Homestretch was built from the voices of young people. That's where we started in 2018. And they still carry and hold decision making and guide us in our work right across the state. And we made a promise to them that, you know, what they'd shared and what they'd hoped for and the system they helped us design was something that we'd roll out. And it's through the commitment of the state government under the Labor government, through initially through Minister McGurk and the Premier Mark McGowan, but now through the Cook government and Minister Sabine Winton, that we're able to follow through with this commitment. And you can see there's a little logo at the bottom. You know, we employ 5 young people with lived experience as consultants, and one of them did a broad consultation piece to design that logo. And for them, that means when that logo's on something that's been designed, developed, and they've tested it. So if you want to know more about the history of Homestretch and how it was designed, that's not what we're going to talk about, but happy to share our journey. One of the most important parts of that journey was our partnership with Yorganup. Working with Yorganup, they described Homestretch as Nichinop Yorga Nulamaya in Noongar country. That means our boys and girls are coming home, which I think when we start to look at other regions and other communities, it's an important point that for this Aboriginal community, Homestretch wasn't about extending support from the care system. It was about bringing young Aboriginal people back into their communities. And that's what we've done across the state. And so I manage the Homestretch WA community of practice, which means I facilitate the expertise, both lived and learned across the state, to come together and make sure it's working. And WA is a big place, and so what we've designed and developed in metro areas is not necessarily what works in regional areas. And so we are on this journey, as I said, to really understand what works and what doesn't. But what brings us together in this journey is that common commitment to young people, and that's about providing them the support that they need to connect and become part of their communities. And so Homestretch in WA is about providing individualised support through a reliable, safe relationship. That transition support is kind of the way that support and resources are offered to that young person through the system. And then that includes a safety net of resources, which is financial aid around, you know, brokerage and investment in them as young people towards their goals, but also a fairly sizable financial commitment to their safe and stable housing. And so we call that a housing allowance, or for young people who are going to stay on with foster carers, it's a staying on agreement. And that's a financial subsidy that continues to support young people. And so when we look at housing and homelessness solutions, for young people, providing that financial support is perhaps the beginning of a journey of finding housing, but certainly doesn't result in housing for every young person. So for young people in WA, in the first year, that's $450 a fortnight that they can have paid towards any housing option. Now I'm going to move a bit away from the detail of it. I think you saw in that model this idea of support circles, and I think in the literature around young people coming out of the care system, for too long we've built systems that are focused on this idea of independence, and we know that that's not the case for any human. We all are connected and part of our communities, and this idea of interdependence has emerged throughout our work, that our goal shouldn't be having young people reaching 21 and being by themselves and not having value and connection in their community. And so interdependence and that ability for young people to give back and be part of is really central to everything we do, and that includes around the housing options. So for young people who are trying to find housing, the solution isn't always a single bedroom unit in government housing. It's about trying to find their connections and where they feel like they can be part of and belong and feel safe and stable. I probably don't need to tell you that, you know, across Australia, homelessness for young people coming out of care is a serious issue, and one of the main functions of Homestretch very much is trying to find safe and stable housing for these young people during a really vulnerable transition period in their lives. And so, I mean, our hope is that we can really significantly impact young people's trajectories through this injection of, you know, supports at the right time. But, you know, the most contemporary research points to 1 in 3 young people were experiencing homelessness at some stage within their first year of leaving care. I've been involved a little bit in the youth homelessness system in Western Australia and involved in the by name lists that are used to measure and capture rough sleepers. And I didn't want to share the data today, but, you know, there are really significant overrepresentations of care leavers in that data as well. So the problem is one that isn't just about the care system, it is about the interdependence of all of the systems that we have around us to help young people. Because when this is an example of something a coach did with a young person in WA, the solution, now and in 5 years isn't just about trying to find, their single bedroom unit. It's about, their connection to others. And I think it's really important that when we start to look at solutions for housing and homelessness for these young people, that we are reflecting what it is they need. Homestretch across the country, every state has got a commitment to it. I think Victoria and WA have very similar service offers. We both independently designed them, but interestingly landed on a very similar idea. I think when we think about what we have in front of us now is we have a bit of a front door for a better system for young people. It provides a real vehicle for young people to engage and be proactively invited to choose where they want to go and what kind of supports they want to receive. And that empowerment, I guess, can really help them, find solutions for them. And I think for us, that vehicle, that system reform of embedding it into every state allows us to start to, bring in other solutions from other parts of the community. So we are kind of stuck though, and every state currently is only offering this financial subsidy payment. So we're not actually offering bricks and mortar, we're not offering housing. And although we can increase a young person's purchasing power for housing, that doesn't necessarily translate to being able to afford a house. And so that is one of the major issues that we need to come together and resolve. I think young people need flexible options. I helped set up Foyer Oxford in WA, and foyers are a really powerful solution for many young people coming out of homelessness. I think that mutual obligation can really help young people move on from that system. But I certainly know in my experience and listening and watching the stories of young people that sometimes the goals of housing options that we provide don't always align with what the young person needs or wants. And so in those situations, we often find young people coming out of the care system who aren't ready for employment or education, who aren't looking to transition to independence, but are looking to find safety and stability and be part of and belong, that sometimes those solutions don't work for them. The other end of the spectrum, obviously, housing first for youth is an emerging idea, and that, I guess I've done a bit of a table here to compare. When we ended up designing Homestretch in WA, it was interesting what we landed on almost equated to a housing first for youth offer that has been kind of studied in Canada and the US. And so some of these commitments that we have in green, they're really clear and strong, but for young people at 21, we need to transition them into their community and to find the people and places that will help them, which might include ongoing support around housing or mental health. So there, I guess you can see there's a bit of a difference. It's not time limited, but for many young people, they're not looking for 5 or 10 years of support. They're looking for enough support to find their stability and connection. As I said before, that at the top, a right to housing with no preconditions. Well, at the moment, what we're offering is a right to financial support. KPMG and Dan, the research that they did for the symposium, provided some ideas about the gaps that we currently have in our system. And, we have lots of targeted solutions that are crisis and short term, and lots of stuff that's aimed at, young people at a particular point in their journey out of the system. But there were very few options that were driven by First Nations, by community organisations. And I think lots of the options that we've seen are developed and delivered for metropolitan areas. So when you have somewhere like the Kimberley, and the Kimberley, it is a beautiful place. This is your country, I think, Marcia. It's 423,000 square kilometres. It's bigger than Germany. It's bigger than Victoria. Young people are spread out across the region. And in terms of housing and homelessness in the Kimberley, it's a system that's overwhelmed. We're not going to fix it through Homestretch. We're not going to fix it through a subsidy. The Western Australian State Government, the Department of Communities, and I'm speaking here on behalf of Anglicare, but not the communities, but I want to recognise that they've made a real commitment to care leavers in our state, and they're working really hard to find solutions that will fit into this Homestretch service offer. But we don't even understand the journey of homelessness in the Kimberley for many young people and families. The rate of homelessness is the highest in WA. It's more than 10 years on a public housing wait list. the costs of trying to build and maintain properties are really prohibitive. And I think for young people, there are very few options. And I'm here to provide a bit of a background. The real stars of this are Emily and Marsha, because they're going to talk to you about what's actually going on in their communities. So we ran a bit of a housing innovation forum a couple of months ago. We recognised that the model we built around housing wasn't going to work in the Kimberley. And so we brought together all the Aboriginal organisations running Homestretch and some key stakeholders from the Department of Communities around housing and other local, stakeholders to start really thinking about what we do with this resource and this vehicle we've created to help young people. What will it mean for those young people in the Kimberley? And so I'll hand over to Emily to help you understand from her perspective.
You might need to help me use this, Andy. Hello everyone, my name's Emily and I'm just going to figure this out. I'm not really good with technology. I'm pushing. There we go. Okay. I work for Broome Youth and Families Hub on Yaru country in Broome. I've only been living in Broome a short time, since February this year, but I've been in the Kimberley quite a long time, working in remote communities all across the Kimberley. A fair amount of time spent in Kununurra as well. I'd like to acknowledge the Yagara and Turrbal people as traditional custodians, and I pay my respect to elders, both past, present and emerging, and extend my gratitude to everyone in this room today. We're all here because we are looking for that progressive change in the future, and appreciate you all attending. A little bit about me, but I won't go into it too much. I'm a counsellor, as it was mentioned. I've worked with Indigenous communities for quite a long time and with youth for an even longer time. I'll probably flick past this little slide and talk about Homestretch. My experience with Homestretch has been incredibly positive. I've coordinated the program since early this year. I've worked in many sectors and for many programs, and I can honestly say I haven't experienced a program that's seeing such significant results so quickly with young people, and I think that definitely falls back to young people co-designing this program. Their voices are heavily embedded in all aspects of the service delivery, and that is really apparent when we're working with young people. Including our staff on the ground. We've got some incredible, what we call transition coaches, who are doing really amazing work with our young people through some pretty difficult circumstances. So homelessness in Broome is a spectrum. This is how I like to describe it. I myself was homeless for 4.5 months at the beginning of the year as a manager. So even for myself to find housing was extremely difficult. We've got working professionals that cannot find housing, or rental prices are so extortionary, up to $1,600 a week, plus the inflated cost of living. It's really difficult to secure somewhere to live, let alone young people who are at risk, who have come out of the care system and are not able to return to family, or they do not have a safe place to live. There isn't available crisis accommodation. The longer term accommodation solutions for young people are completely full, so young people in Homestretch are on wait lists. We've had to house young people, and we've got a great relationship with Child Protection, so we work hand in hand. They've supported us to house young people in temporary accommodation, but this is not a long-term fix. I'll flick through this. So I just thought because my passion lies in the work on the ground, so I thought I'd share a couple of case stories. When Homestretch first rolled out, we didn't have any coaches on the ground. I was the coordinator, the coach, and I was managing a whole string of other things. So I met a young man who had been referred to Homestretch but had chosen at the time not to engage over several months. I then received a few very angry text messages from this young man feeling that nobody was helping him. He was 18 and he'd left care. He didn't understand that he had left care. He hadn't had the correct communication as he hadn't been placed with a case manager for quite a long time before leaving care. I met with him. He was extremely escalated, extremely frustrated. None of that scared me. I'd seen it all. I've worked in resi care. I've worked in many, many different trauma spaces. This young man was incredibly bright, a very sharp young fella, and I could see that immediately. He just needed someone to listen and to not be scared of his frustration. In a really short time, it was because he'd said yes to Homestretch, he'd onboarded, he'd given us consent to work with him. I could just swoop in and support his needs immediately. These seem like very basic needs, so the getting him signed up for Centrelink, so just some stream of income was really important at the time for him. He had been in a family foster placement all of his life. It wasn't a placement that he wanted to be in, and it wasn't a place where he felt that he was supported. So immediately after turning 18, he chose to leave this placement, and that left him homeless. This is a pattern that I am seeing in Broome, is long-term placements break down quite quickly when a young person turns 18, and their options for housing, there are no options. So they are jumping around, living with family members or extended family members, sleeping rough. It's a very, very common thread that we're seeing. What I like to reflect on is the unbelievable strength that not just this young man, but many of the young people we work with have. So even given the circumstance of not having any stable or safe accommodation, these young people are showing up. We're getting them enrolled in TAFE. We're taking them to see what's possible for them. They're getting jobs. It's really inspiring to see, and it shows us that if there was that stability, imagine what they could achieve if they had a stable living placement, if they had somewhere to come back to at night, if they could keep their things in one place. Imagine what would be possible for them. So this was just one story. There's many stories. I'm really shaky. Can you hear it in my voice? I'll just give you a couple of, because I think that that's really where the heart of my work is I manage multiple programs, but when I'm on the ground and I'm working with young people, that's when I see the impact of what we're doing. Another example would be, we had a young man who was referred to Homestretch while he was in prison. He exited out of prison and had none of the social work strategies put in place for him. He had no housing, he was under a guardianship stat order, so he wasn't able to access any of his money. He had nowhere to go. He was in a really, really tough situation with many complex needs as well. Because he had said yes verbally, also we did a lot of work with Andy around, he wasn't literate. He could barely write his name. Signing forms was a really big trigger for him. So that really flexible way of working, which we value so much with the Homestretch team. If we've got an issue, we can call them up and we can figure it out to make it work for the young person. We were able to swoop in and provide this young man with all of our supports. That is where the work is really impactful, is that flexibility to be able to support. There are a few case stories. And that really wraps it up. Solutions for us would be having somewhere to place young people, not just in crisis, but to set them up in that longer term solution where Homestretch can work alongside of them. There's that period that we were talking, Andy mentioned about a young person has the right to also have a time of self-exploration. It's important, I believe, that we don't force a young person to recover quickly from their past and channel them into a job or channel them into a trajectory that they might not be ready for or they might not even want. I think there needs to be that period of self-discovery, of chipping away and doing some work on themselves and figuring themselves out a little bit before they launch into the next chapter of their life. Unfortunately, in Broome, the available options, you do have to be engaged in study or work. So there isn't that flexibility that's provided for young people to have that space. Yes, so thank you so much for listening. I'll hand you over to Marcia.
And Emily told me that she couldn't talk, she was too nervous. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, custodians of this country in which we are meeting today. I'd like to pay my respects to the elders, both past, present and emerging. My name is Marcia and I am a Murrung-Gurrung woman. Kununurra is the home of the Murrung people, and this is where I come from. Kununurra is a relatively new town, established in 1961 as a service centre for the Ord River irrigation system, so it's 62 years old. Current population of Kununurra is around 5,300. There are 1,213 Aboriginal people who live in Kununurra, less than half of the town's population. There are 126 0 to 4-year-olds and 325 5 to 14-year-old Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people who reside in Kununurra. 161 children and young people are currently in out-of-home care in the East Kimberley. 100% are Aboriginal. The National Closing the Gap Target 12 recommends that by 2031 there is to be a reduction of the rate of over-representation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in out-of-home care by 45%. We have 8 years to meet that target. Murrung-Gurrung Corporation received, this isn't the PowerPoint. Is this it? I've gone too far, sorry. That's gone backwards. No, this isn't it, Andy. Anyway, I'll just talk. So, whereabouts? Oh, that's okay, I'll just talk. So I work for Murrung-Gurrung Corporation. I am the Youth Programs Manager. I manage 3 programs that work with youth. One is the Target 120 program, which works with 10 to 14-year-olds that have been in the justice system, and we work holistically with the whole family to address any of the needs. The needs can be, which include housing, education, training, employment, overcrowding of homes, antisocial behaviour and criminal activity. With the Leaving Care program, which is one of our pilot programs, which is in Kununurra and Broome, we work with 15 to 17-year-olds who are still in the care, in out-of-home care, I should say, and we so work with the young people and their case managers to get them ready to transition out of care. Home Stretch program, we work with 18 to 21-year-olds to address any of their needs, and to also just provide them support in re-engaging back into our community, because a lot of our young people, as you can see the numbers that I had up here before, have been in care since they were very small. So it's re-engaging them back into our community, but also back into our families, and to reconnect families, because a lot of these families have been disconnected for so long with these young people. One of the biggest issues for young people in our community, and they face daily, is the lack of stable accommodation. So through MG Corporation, we are currently working on 2 projects. One is the Youth Student Hostel, which was built in 2010. The Youth Student Hostel has got 22 rooms. The Youth Hostel has been vacant since the close of our COVID, since 2021. It closed during COVID and has not reopened. This facility, from the time it was built, has only had one student and 6 staff members. It has never been utilised properly. We are in the middle of negotiating with Aboriginal Hostels Limited to use that facility for young people 18 to 24-year-olds, and that will include our homestretch young people so that they have somewhere stable to live. We are also working through MG Corporation. We have done a business case this year, and through that, with lots of consultation with our community, and our community came back and said what we need is a healing hub. We need to move forward in life. We need to address the traumas in which Aboriginal people have faced throughout our lifetime. And so MG Corporation are now, through our business case, we are now looking to find funds to build a healing hub which will address the needs, the trauma and intergenerational trauma of our people. We will also be working holistically with the whole family to address all of the multiple needs of our people. And with that, you know, we need sustainable and long-term funding so that we're constantly having pilot programs run within our community, and pilot programs that are run for 18 months. And it's not working, and it hasn't worked for a long time. We need long-term funding to address the needs of our people. And I'm sorry, my slides didn't work, but it was more. So yes, that's me. I'm sorry, I can't think of anything else that I could have, what was on the slides. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's weird. I uploaded the one you...
I might just check. Yep, excellent. My mic works, and I hope those online can hear me. For those who weren't here at the beginning, we are going to open up for audience questions, but I did want to start by kind of asking the panel a couple of things just based on the presentation. So I think, Emily, it was you in your presentation that just talked about the lack of basic options in terms of the stock that's available. And then, Marcia, I was really interested to hear you talk about, right at the end of your talk, about repurposing facilities. So maybe for both of you, the question is about kind of what type of options, what type of stock is needed in more remote communities to actually meet the need that's coming through.
I think the difference between Kununurra and Broome is we haven't been able to identify any existing stock to create transitional homes for young people. We've been having discussions around the importance of it needing to be a community-led project and a young people to have ownership over what we develop or design or try and get off the ground. We've had multiple meetings with different stakeholders in Broome, and just rallying that understanding of just how crucial it is to not just have these conversations, but to really action some transitional housing for young people. And we have had some positive feedback from the Department of Housing around available land stock. So it's an interesting environment up there in Broome with housing. There's a lot of people that come to Broome to work, and essential workers, and there's a lot of grow homes. These grow homes also do sit empty for long periods of time, up to 10 years, I'm told. There's conversations around needing to put these back onto the market, to release them back to the public again after a period of time. So there is existing stock, but it isn't open to for us to be able to really use. Yeah.
And I think some of the challenges to that come from our inability to maintain and repair lots of these facilities. The costs associated with doing it in regions are really difficult to meet.
Yeah.
Marcia, you touched a little bit on the role of community in really getting behind projects and coming forward, both with ideas, but also potentially playing a role in managing and operating that housing going forward. So could you explore or expand a little bit on the role of community locally in perhaps playing a greater role in actually providing and managing some of those housing options?
For myself, it's yes, community has to take ownership of these projects. We have to be leading these projects so that we get more out of it, and our young people can see. For myself, as an Aboriginal woman, and a lot of the young people that I work with, they see that they can be more.
What struck me in the research that we did for the Homestretch Symposium was, to state the obvious, young people's lives are chaotic, and particularly for kids who've spent a large part of their childhood in care, they may have moved around quite a bit in terms of people who are looking after them, both family and in state-based care. That means often when they leave formal care, they also seek to move around, as any young person would, with lengths of tenancy perhaps being no longer than a year in any one place. So how does a housing system in remote and rural Australia really cope with that movement? What are the range or the menu of options that need to be there to make sure that there is coverage, I guess, for people like you, Emily, who are trying to navigate people into something that is safe and stable?
I think Marcia will talk better on this little subject, but I think that there's a real misunderstanding around young people moving around, Aboriginal young people moving around from home to home. There's a real, and I'd love you to talk about this, but there's a real difference between moving from family to family, which is a natural way of living, as opposed to not having anywhere to go. So I think that what we've witnessed is some of the young, particularly young men in our Homestretch program, they may have relatives that they can go and stay with, but it's not a place that they would opt to stay with should there be another option. Sometimes these places are actually very unsafe for these young people. That didn't really answer the question, but I think if you extend on that, Marcia, because I do find that's a misunderstanding that people don't understand around what we'd say transients.
Yeah. No, there is a misunderstanding with that. With Aboriginal people, we are a community. And you just don't have your mother, father, brother and sister. We have extended family also. We've got uncles, aunties, cousins, sisters, and it's a whole community. So, one night a young person could spend a night in, the cousin's house, and the next night they're staying at the uncle or the auntie's house. So they're not transient, they're moving between houses. And this is, I'm just going to say it, this is a Gadiya term of being homeless, whereas this is living in a community. This is our people, our young people are finding where they're wanting to find stability. And they find, and Aboriginal people, we all care for one another.
Yeah. I think there's an assumption that some of the solutions that we develop in metropolitan areas are what we should trial and work in these regions. And so I think it's really important, as Emily said, that whatever we're doing there, we're listening and learning as we go. But for me, it's also important to recognise that, Marcia, families look after their children and their community, but some of these families are really overwhelmed, aren't they? The housing crisis is about, yes, there's capacity to family and there's a real commitment to look after the family, but there's nowhere for family to go sometimes, even in these overcrowded houses. Yeah.
Oh, there's definite overcrowding within our community. And, I'm sorry that my slide didn't work, but I had, stories of from two of our young people that, they're re-engaging back into their community, they're reconnecting with their family. And, one of the young people spoke to me and said that they feel like they're a stranger to their family. So we're here to support those young people and that family to reconnect as best as we can.
So like the idea of having a lease that you're fixed to and you can't move around, and if you go and stay with family, you lose your housing. That's not going to work for young people who are in that journey of reconnecting.
And that's why, our corporation is working on getting the student hostel to turn it into the youth hostel so that these young people have somewhere stable to live.
And if you have that across the Kimberley, if you have multiple hostels or multiple places, we do what do we call it, like a shared care through Homestretch, because young people do move throughout the Kimberley, and really we just do it the Kimberley way and call each other up and say, I got this young fella coming your way, can you help him out? But if we did have those available hostels or those available accommodations that were similar in the way that they were run, then it would allow a young person to have that flexibility to move safely throughout the Kimberley and not have that unknown of where am I going to stay.
So that would be a baseline of provision that's not currently there, that would provide that kind of stability if it was available more universally. I think for those who are in the plenary session this morning, I was struck by a question that somebody asked about the funding models really not working for youth housing because the economics don't always add up in terms of the stability of rent and also tenancy. Marcia, you touched on the answer is not pilot projects, but much more sustained funding. Can you elaborate, and I'm keen to hear from you too, Andy, about what would a funding model look like for housing for young people in the region that we're talking about that would actually give the stability that the panel is talking about?
For myself, and I can only speak for my community, is we need funding that's going to be at least 10 years of funding, because that is the generation of a young person's life for that change. Because we need to have generational change within our communities.
Yeah, that resonates really strongly with me. I mean, we're talking about some of the most vulnerable people in our community and some of the most isolated and challenging places to live. And so when we helicopter in a pilot project, sometimes we're causing more harm than good. I do think balancing that, the costs of actually providing this commitment to young people. So I talked a bit about, home stretches about a young person's right. Well, right now we are trying to provide a really flexible way to finance young people's choice, but in a place where the rent is over $1,000 a week, $450 a fortnight doesn't mean anything. And so I think, in Perth metropolitan area, we have great success in trying to find solutions for young people, and lots of the homestretch providers have started to use the housing allowance funding to set up transitional housing programs with young people living together. And so the policy we've developed is quite flexible. But I think Australia, and it's not just about Western Australia, but these communities, they're in Queensland, they're in the Northern Territory. I think we need a much better understanding of how to actually establish that commitment to housing for not just young people, but for their families. If we just build more transitional houses, where do they lead to, is my question.
And we have that opportunity to work with young mindsets, and I think that that's probably one of the most powerful things we can do. I think what I've witnessed is, and I bring it up all the time, that when a young person leaves care, they do their leaving care handover, and they're told, we've put you on the Department of Housing list. And what I see with young people up there is they accept that. Well, I say that's a really great backup plan, but what else is there for you? And it's planting those seeds that it was great sitting in the session that we just sat in with, what was it, IBA? Yeah, around Aboriginal home ownership. And maybe a young person wants to study, maybe they want to leave community for some period of time, maybe they want to rent with mates. There's so many different options, but I think I've seen and I've witnessed in the Kimberley is a limitation on what is possible. And I think that not just Homestretch, we as people working with young people can really empower and provide the opportunity to know what is available for them as well.
So I'll just put a call out. I'm going to open up for audience questions in 1 second. One last question to the panel. Just and one for you, Andy, and this kind of goes to the fact that you're bridging two roles at the moment. But interested in your thoughts before we go to audience questions about the relative roles and responsibilities here for government, local community actors, and as per Marcia's comment, what can be done to really genuinely build the capacity of local community organisations to address this issue as well locally?
I think in WA there is a commitment and a recognition that the only solutions that will work are the ones that are developed by Aboriginal people for Aboriginal people. I mean, that was the basis for our work on Homestretch. And when we start to look at communities in these regions and the journeys they've been on, I'm one of countless well-intentioned non-Aboriginal people who've come in to try and help. And I think when I listen and speak and hear Marcia and Lawford talk about the vision for MG, it really inspires me. It talks to a community that is ready to take on its responsibility for and with its people. And I think for me that is the pathway forwards. We often contract, speaking on as an outsider of this system, I walk a very delicate line. The department often contracts individual programs for a community service to deliver. Marcia talked about 3, but I mean, families don't work as individual silos, and I think it's about understanding how do families and communities want their services to be delivered. And yep, we want rights for young people to have certain levels of support, and that's what we support each provider to develop. But in the end, solutions aren't going to come from the system that created them.
Fantastic. That's a very powerful segue. I can see there are lots of people itching to ask questions. So a colleague in the second row first. Oh, hang on. If you could just hang on for the
my name's Darlene Thomas. I'm the CEO of Mallee District's Aboriginal Services Far Northwest, Victoria, so close to the Victorian, New South Wales and South Australian border. We're not remote, we're rural. But I'd like to touch on a couple of comments that you made, Marsha. You know, we had a whole range of Aboriginal hostels throughout the country, and when they collapsed, that really impacted our people. So we do need those back. That's a very quick and easy solution. And yes, our kids especially like to go and be able to stay with family, but they need somewhere that they can call home. So keep fighting for that 22 better. Because, you know, we also need to empower our young kids when they're coming out of care to think bigger than Department of Housing, or think bigger than go to TAFE. What's your aspiration? And I think the quicker we get our children engaged in something, the better outcomes we'll get for them, or they'll get for themselves. So totally hostels, I'm big, I've been harping on about that for the last 12 months, I think, at all levels for Victoria. But our community feels that fight as well, because there's so many of our children that are in care, and then they're forced to be in care with kinship, which then overburdens those family networks, which then when a child is out of the system and it's doing what they would traditionally do, they're feeling like they're a burden because they don't have a home base. So I do know that program and how helpful it has been, but you need somewhere to utilise that money, right?
Yep.
Marcia, did you want to comment? Or? No. We'll keep going. I think. Sorry, I don't know whose mic is. Might be mine. Kate.
Thanks. I'm Kate from Homelessness Australia. Just firstly, thanks so much. I'm really fascinated with what you've been sharing. I'm really interested in the hostel option that you're talking about. Just really keen to hear you talk more about how you imagine that working, because one of the things that sort of went through my mind when you're talking about it is, you know, this group coming out of care, obviously some of those young people will be in a bit of a chaotic space, and so when you talk about putting, you know, young apprentices and young people getting their start in their working life in the same accommodation facility as young people who might be in more of a messy kind of place, I think, oh God, how's that going to work? So I'm really interested to hear you talk about how that might work.
I'm glad you asked that question. It was actually on one of my slides that I couldn't come up. But MG Corporation will be working in partnership with another Aboriginal organisation in our town, and our homestretch staff will be based at the hostel, so they will be working with the young people, our participants from the homestretch program. But Wunan, the other Aboriginal organisation we will be working in partnership with, will be working with the apprentices and the trainees as well. So we will have support people on the ground in the hostel, so the young people will not be living there without the support that they need.
I'd also like to respond. I mean, I worked at Foyer Oxford when we went from a pilot to 98 young people living in one building, and I guess there's real inherent challenges to that congruent living. And I think the solutions that I've heard emerging are, you know, you've got that balance is important, but you've got young people who want to give back into the community. You've got that role of peer mentoring. So, you know, conditionality, I guess I have mixed feelings about. You know, do you have to work and study to live here? Well, I think for those who are ready for it, works and it empowers them. For those who aren't, it's what is the offer that helps them find the stability and safety they need. So I think the solution will have to emerge through the community working with them. I mean, one of the cases you were talking about is a young person in Homestretch who's now working.
Yes.
Yeah, do you want to share a little bit about?
So we work with a through Homestretch program, the young male that's just come out of care. He's 18 years old. He now works for our organisation. He unfortunately was, when he came out of care, he was living with his younger brother, who is in a placement also, out of home care placement. That placement broke down. So we had to find him accommodation. We could only find him short-term accommodation with the only available hotel that was in Kununurra, and that was only short-term. Now he's living in overcrowded conditions with family. And, you know, there's all sorts of antisocial behaviour and stuff like that that he's encountering every day, living in the community. So it's, he's one of the young people that has said to us, you know, if we get this hostel, that's where I want to live. I just need my own space. I need my own bed. I need somewhere where I can go to sleep at night and have my, you know, have my things in a room that I can go back and find that in my room. I'm not looking, you know, wondering if someone has stolen it. So that will be his space. And for him to be able to go to bed and get up the next day and go to work. That's what he's asking for. Yeah.
And we spoke to Jungani Jatir in Halls Creek, you know, at the housing forum we ran, and one of the Aboriginal women from a community outside of Halls Creek spoke about the role of elders in this. And I guess I'd be really interested to hear from others who work with Aboriginal communities and Aboriginal organisations, you know, what is the role of community in supporting these young people who are really struggling with trauma? You know, we can create a housing option like a foyer where, you know, young people really struggle to manage in there, and that contamination of behaviours and that, you know, the environment can become quite unstable. But what if, you know, elders and other community were part of that environment? What are the things that could be used to help provide the safety and stability those young people are looking for?
Can I just answer that question again? Sorry. You asked the question about how will they all fit together. A lot of these young people are family. They're all connected in some way. So, you know, if one of them has got an issue, they will be able to talk to one another because they're all connected in some way.
I'm just going to let our colleague here comment, and then we've got a colleague who's been very patient at the front, who I'll come to next.
Just on that question or statement, the issue is our current child protection system has worn out our elders because we've got great-grandparents raising their great-grandchildren, and it's not just one or two, it's 10, 8, all at the one time. Our elders are tired. They keep giving the solutions and the government doesn't listen. So their contribution is, you fellas now need to fix this problem because you've all created it. If you had allowed us to provide you the information and listen to us, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in now, where our children are overrepresented in everything.
And those points very powerfully put recently in Victoria through Uruk. Yeah. Thank you for waiting.
Anyway, okay. My name's Tanea. I'm a proud Nogo Yuin woman from down South Coast ways of Sydney. I just wanted to say about in relation to AHL, I came up through that system as well as a young woman, and I did have a messy living arrangement growing up, but I just wanted to touch on I wanted you to make sure that you explore that pathway with AHL because it's extremely special, and it provided me as a young woman when I needed that with housing and that support system with young fellas around me and my brothers and sisters and my Melbourne community, and it's going to be a very powerful and impactful initiative if you are able to get your hands on that and explore that avenue, because it did a lot for me. I went on and I was studying at the time. I was studying policing, and if it wasn't for the support of those mob, it wouldn't have allowed me to begin my career in the police force when I did. And so it's not really a question. I just wanted to touch on how important that is, and I'd really love to see that be explored a lot more. And AHL is often forgotten in these sorts of scenarios, but I think it is incredibly important, and I'd like to see a lot happening in that space.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much for sharing. Just looking, there's two people waiting, I think. Yeah, I'll come to you first, about 6 rows back. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amy. I used to be a teacher in the Kimberley, and now I work in out-of-home care research in New South Wales, but I've also just joined Q Shelter. So I have a pretty specific question about the Homestretch campaign and also staying put arrangements. So in New South Wales, staying put payments are higher than the payments you can get to live independently. So in the context of WA, and specifically in the context of young people who may be moving between households, are they eligible for a higher payment if there is a higher payment, or do they have to go independent living?
The amount of money that's available for housing is the same, and it was really important to young people that, you know, we weren't preferencing and biasing based on what the experience you had of placements. And so, yeah, New South Wales is committed to Homestretch. I guess every state is doing it differently. I would suggest that they're at the beginning of their journey of what Homestretch is.
That's great to hear that it's equal. Thank you.
Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andy. Now to the very back, please.
Hi, Suzanne from Mercy Care in Western Australia. I'll just start by saying we've had the absolute pleasure of watching the Homestretch program roll out across the state, and the level of advocacy and that co-design with young people has been absolutely phenomenal. Obviously, the program's still rolling out across the state. Has anything come from, or any ideas or solutions come from the co-design or the data or the research around maybe other innovative solutions for young people where Homestretch may not be suitable? Because I'm just very mindful that unfortunately the leaving home and leaving care system and the care system in general will be in place for some time as is. Has anything come that might be helpful?
I mean, I guess our journey is about how do we make sure young people can access the resources they need to 21. So yes, we want to look at a continuum of support, and Homestretch is this lever that's shone a spotlight in WA around, well, what does 15 to 25 look like? And that journey is one we're on at the beginning of. But I think what we're doing in the Kimberley, it's about, well, Homestretch meant this last year. What does it mean once we've really embedded the voices of local community? And what we're understanding from the Kimberley and the Pilbara and from Kalgoorlie is that housing needs to be embedded into this offer. It's not just about a financial subsidy. So, and that was the narrative at the National Forum, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the conclusion out of that discussion, if you could say there was any firm conclusion, was that the grant on its own, or a grant on its own, was not sufficient. And I think we heard that from all three panellists, that having tangible, real housing options available is also absolutely critical, because the instability can grow very quickly once young people leave care and worsen.
Our program has only been running since March of this year. And we have seen outcomes with a lot of the young people that we've been working with. But for myself as an Aboriginal woman in my community, it's about supporting our young people, and it's about being an Aboriginal-led program that we're finding solutions for our people, and supporting these young people to become strong adults.
Thank you. I might just check. I don't think we have online questions, so we certainly have time for more questions in the room. So right here at the front. Thank you.
So please wait until we give you a mic, because I just found out that, sorry for your question, it wasn't picked up on the streaming. So we will definitely find you, don't worry.
Do you want to ask?
Apologies to those online.
Thank you. Diane Jackson. I'm the CEO of Key Assets Australia, and we work across the Kimberley in Kununurra and Broome and Halls Creek. And you are talking about the young people that we work with and we care so deeply about. And I've seen the work that you guys do in the community and how powerful that is. It strikes me in listening to you today that it's the sort of tectonic plate thing that you mentioned at the beginning there. It's not just the housing supply, it's all those other things that need to be in place to support this work and support our young people to go back on country to their communities, because 100% of the kids that we've got in that area are Aboriginal kids. And I was really interested in the Healing Hub. I just wondered if you could talk a bit more about that.
So at the beginning of this year, MG Corporation were lucky enough to receive some funding from the Kimberley Development Commission to develop our business case for a healing hub within our community. We had multiple consultations with our community, with our elders, with families, with parents. And what the message that we kept coming up with was that our people said, we need healing. We need a place for our people to heal from the traumas. That's for the whole, and it's not to be divided. You know, a lot of the times some sectors just work with the young people. Some sectors just work with just the adults. It needs to be a holistic approach so that we are healing the whole family and so that we are able to move forward. And until that happens, the message that got back to our corporation was that, from our people, was that until we heal, we can't move forward. So that healing hub will be a facility where people can receive the support and the services that are needed for them to address their need.
Fantastic. I might just scan the room. Over on the left-hand side. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kashka. I'm from Department of Social Services. Thank you, everyone, because it's been a great session. Emily, something that you said really resonated with me, and that was that we need to give young people that time for self-discovery and reflection upon leaving care about what they then launch into in the next stage of their life. And was just hoping you might elaborate a bit more on what supports could be around someone who's not ready to transition and launch into work as that next stage.
I think as a society in general, we are channeled and conditioned into often a way of living life that isn't always conducive to positive mental health. I think if you are talking about a young person who has been through a significantly challenging experience in their young life through to their young adult life, and we have these expectations that they can step out of that position and straight into being really successful in what they're doing, of course that is a possibility, but we need to allow that buffer period. I think we are lucky with the Homestretch team. It's amazing what one person can do in your life. That one person that genuinely believes in you, shows up for you, doesn't let you down. I think that there is huge merit in being that person for someone and having that person available. I do think that relies a lot on, in all the work we all do, the person on the ground, the person who is on the ground doing that work. So I think that is available in one aspect for these young people through our teams across the Kimberley and through WA in Homestretch. But I think if we were to really wanting to extend that support, it would come back to that housing option. It would come back to that hostel space, or that there is a place where a young person is not forced out into the workforce before they're ready, that there is that buffer zone for them. Where they can seek and have the supports that they need. And when, Marcia, you're talking about the Healing Hub, I'm not sure that there's been discussions of anything like that in Broome, but having that space for Aboriginal people as well. So they're surrounded by their family, their community. Don't know if that's the answer, but that's, how I would see it.
Yeah, I think we often, lots of people in Western systems derive meaning and social connection through work. And I think some of those things that maybe we look for in our work life, there are other ways in community those can be offered. Can we measure that in terms of Centrelink reporting? I don't know. I certainly know that there's an opportunity to really listen and understand what that would look like through something like a Healing Hub.
And if you've been, like you were saying, there, if you've been disconnected from your family or your community, then finding a job may not be your top priority. It may be returning back to your family and getting to know your mob. I think it's individual, very individual.
I can certainly say not in WA, but recent experience visiting Village 21 in Melbourne, which is run by Anglicare and Kids Undercover and with support of local government, that my experience talking to young people who've recently moved into that model is that there is often a period of not wanting to do anything other than learn the skills of living semi-independently in that space. And that's a community of 6 modular homes where there is some on-the-ground support. But yeah, certainly the young people I met there were not ready at that stage to jump straight into training or jobs. There was a period of adjustment, certainly.
Not all of our referrals are in the same position, but many of our referrals are young people that haven't been linked into the systems that they need in order to support their life in adulthood moving forward. So pretty much most of our referrals that we receive, the first month or 2 is really spent cleaning up the crises in their life, supporting them with emergencies, linking them up to get an ID or to get a license or to get that Centrelink income support. It's all of those scaffolding steps that we may have had available if you were to grow up in a secure home. You were scaffolded to get to the point of 18, where some of these young people, they haven't had that scaffolding, and then suddenly they're 18 and expected to participate as an adult in the community, but they don't have the steps below them. So that's homestretch sweeps in.
And I remember back when we were building Foyer Oxford, we tried to accredit life skills and these sorts of things against a Cert 1 to provide that kind of accreditation of something which, how can you accredit some of these things when a young person feels like they know who they are and who their mob is and how to connect back? I think these Western and Aboriginal worldviews need to be kind of understood, and we're often walking in 2 worlds, and I think we force these young people into this other world where they're often, as Marsha said, disconnected from their Aboriginal community and disconnected from Western paradigms of thinking and what we define as success. So there's a lot of healing that needs to happen. That's not to say that work can't be part of that or pathways. I know that you're employing some of the young people. We heard universally across the state when we've gone out and designed Homestretch, that Aboriginal organisations want these young people to give back. They hit 21, 22 and start to help and support and mentor others, which is a really, community way of doing things.
Amazing, thank you. We probably have time for 1 or maybe 2 more questions from the audience, if there are any burning questions. A gentleman in the middle, thank you.
So we have noticed a lot of, my name is Michael. I'm coming from the Salvation Army as a public policy advisor from Melbourne. So we have been noticing a lot of young people homeless, and also there is a new tendency of unaccompanied children becoming homeless. So with your experience, do you have a single solution to address this issue?
There's never not one solution to this problem. It's complex. It is a complex issue. And to find out why that young person is on the streets, you have to know their story. You have to talk to that young person to find the solutions.
Emily, you look like you might want to add.
No, it's just well said. Yeah, it's very complex. Mm-hmm.
1 more question.
Hi there, g'day Darlene. Vince Wilson, I'm the CEO of Mallee Accommodation and Support Program, so based in Mildura in far west Victoria. Like Darlene, we work together very closely between our organisations and others on a lot of things. But I just thought I'd share, something we're doing, because I thought it might be interesting to you. And admittedly, it's early because we've gotten the funding for it. We're about to start building. And we've had this problem as well, where we are a community service provider. We are also a small housing provider. So as a community service provider, the problem we've had forever is we've got the funding in Victoria, same as WA, to work with the young people until they're 21, but there's been no physical resource of housing to accommodate them. So we were lucky enough, we've got some funding through from the Victorian government, which we're about to start spending on building only 3 one-bedroom units specifically for youth leaving care. And what we'll be doing with those is the young people will be able to live in them for up to 12 months while they remain engaged with their worker from the organisation. We'll be constantly working with them on what that next step beyond that 12 months is, but it's going to give us just a small resource. And what's interesting is, you know, we think we need about 15 of these in our town. So it's not huge, you know, we don't have enough yet, but we don't think we need hundreds of them. So to me, this is one of these problems where for a relatively modest or very modest amount of money in the scheme of things, if we can find it, we can actually address this resource very effectively. And the other thing about it, you know, I don't know, I think Victoria, we might get a little bit more money than what you're talking about in WA in terms of available to put towards the rent, but even what you're talking about, no way can you pay the rent in Broome, clearly. But if you could build something affordable yourself, you could afford to operate it for that that payment. And that's what we're going to be doing with those properties, is for the amount we're able to get through the program for the young person to pay rent. It's not a market rent, but it'll pay our expenses and pay the maintenance on the property and allow us to continue doing it. So good luck on finding some resources.
We definitely, the Department of Communities has been really helpful in allocating or finding properties. I think that the solution is very much about that. This problem isn't something that can't be solved. DSS have been great as well. They've exempted our subsidies from impacting young people's income. So I think, yeah, definitely keen to have more discussions. If other people, I mean, the hostels, that seems to be needing to have a conversation across the country around what can we do with this really important resource, but we're keen to connect and share and learn from each other. So, yeah.
And as we did the research for the Homestretch Symposium, I guess just echo that positive note that you put on the table there, that the numbers proportionately, I mean, this conference is obviously looking at the macro picture of housing need across Australia for all cohorts, but this is a cohort that, in our view, could be cracked with effort targeted and community-led for the relatively small number of young people who are in this position each year. So I'd just say, yeah, I agree. It's this is something that governments could have a red-hot go at solving. I'd like to end on that positive note. No, Kate, one more question. We will do one more question and then we'll wrap up and it'll be afternoon tea time. Kate, thank you.
Thanks. It's actually just more of a comment, actually. So we've got a session tomorrow on a youth housing model, which is looking to sort of fund, fill this, be a generic youth housing model that can be used to fill this gap. So in every area of youth homelessness policy, we talk about community housing providers won't build housing for young people because the model's not it's not financially viable, and we can't get young people into private rental accommodation because the landlords won't accept them. And so this is about having a financial model for young people that government would fund that would be an adequate level of subsidy to enable community housing providers to build housing for young people that they can rent to them at a lower rent because they have lower income, and then also have the support, adequate subsidy so that there can be support for young people as well. So then it could be modified to suit different young people in different kind of contexts.
Brilliant. So that's a great advert for tomorrow's session. And if today's session threw the ball in the air, tomorrow can whack it. So, all right, on that note, I just want to ask you to join with me in thanking our 3 presenters, Andy, Marcia and Emily. And by way of navigation, we are now heading into afternoon tea, which runs until 3:30, when there'll be a plenary session on rental systems, which I understand is back in the very large room. So for now, thank you very much. Bye.
Quarter yourself. Another case of love. Quarter yourself. Another case of love. Another case of love. Quarter yourself. Another case of love.